What you manifest in your mind, you can bring to reality.
Steve Jobs, a movie that came out in 2015, directed by Danny Boyle, written by Aaron Sorkin. I'm a big Danny Boyle fan. He's a director that really doesn't conform to a specific genre or style of filmmaking, I would say. I mean, he's done not only Steve Jobs, but like the Train Spotting. He did 127 Hours. He did just all kinds of different types of movies, and just really interesting and unique storytelling ways. Like this movie specifically, I'm a big fan of Steve Jobs. I was a big fan. I mean, I still am, I guess. As far as just being an inspiration, I remember going. I was in Target next to the movie theater when I'm getting candy, about to go see a movie called 50/50, about a guy who has cancer, and I get a notification on my phone telling me that Steve Jobs just died, and he had pancreatic cancer. It's kind of a weird situation, but I was a huge fan of Steve Jobs, right? Makes amazing products, amazing salesperson, very innovative, just inspiring, in general. Like just the story of his where, creating the Apple computer and then kind of having some success early on, later getting kicked out of his own company, then later, being brought back. The new company he started gets bought by Apple, and then he takes over. And once he takes over, it's just Apple has this resurgence. And it's like all these things that happened within my lifetime, the rise and fall and then rebirth of Apple to where they're one of the biggest companies ever. So when this movie came out, I was skeptical about watching it. I was skeptical. I mean, there's on the geek side, there's a lot of people that don't like this movie because it's not specifically accurate, which, duh, it's a movie, not a documentary. But I think, so it took me a while to watch it, even though I like this director. The writer's really good. And then the subject matter I really like. So it's on Netflix. I finally put it on, and it's told through, so it kind of follows Steve Jobs throughout kind of different points in his life, told through the keynotes that he does, which was well known for the keynotes, just kind of really his time to shine as a salesperson. So it was all of these kind of pre-show moments of before the keynote event is about to start. It's like just how everything kind of falls apart. So this movie kind of jumps from the early keynote to where they're trying to announce the Apple II, and they want the computer to say hello when they show it, to kind of like, it's after the big Super Bowl ad where it's like that dystopian 1982, 1984. What is that? That's that kind of dystopian kind of Big Brother movie book. Anyway, it's like a really well-known commercial where like the chick and like the jazzercise stuff throws a sledgehammer through the evil dictator on the screen. So it starts off with that keynote, and it kind of goes through the different keynotes. And within that family drama, you're seeing his interactions with, Wozniak and the different people that helped create Apple, along with his personal assistant, which may or may not exist, along with his child that he's had issues with. And I've listened to a lot of the book that was written on Steve Jobs and just kind of where he came from and, his past and just kind of the person he was, which he wasn't a good person. He was technically a bad guy. Like, he had a kid that he didn't want to claim and, didn't want to support the mom and like all these kind of things. He's like an asshole to the people that work for him. But because of it was because of his like obsession with being this like innovator, this driven guy that's going to change. Like, he wanted to affect culture. He wanted to manipulate the history of mankind, and he did. He did. He did with the computers, but he did it more so with the iPhone. I think the iPhone, especially today, is completely changed the entire landscape of how humans communicate, how things are organized, how connected and how fractured we are. So it was interesting. It's an interesting way to tell the story through these keynote moments. And just great acting as well by Michael Fassbender. Just played a really great Steve Jobs, in my opinion. But I like the movie. I like the movie a lot. I mean, in addition to just the style at which the story was told, kind of through these different moments in his career, kind of giving you the roadmap of what happens in between those moments, as far as him getting kicked out of Apple, and then like him starting Next, and then Apple buying Next, and like his kid growing up and that relationship. And just there were moments in this also that weren't as good, that kind of had the feeling that you would get from watching most biopics on like a band, where it's like these things are mentioned offhand that end up being really big things. Like there's a scene at the end where he's talking to his daughter, who's, I don't know, she's in college, about to go to college, but around that age range, and he's telling her, he's like about to announce the iMac, so the big colorful Macintosh, which was kind of the first product that Apple kind of exploded with. Where when he came back to Apple, he got rid of a lot of the products they were doing, really slimmed down everything, made it very like only giving people a few options to choose from. Like he's always been very specific with what he wants to put out, and also very specific with the detail. There's this quote from his book where his dad was a cabinet maker. Maybe he was a stepdad, was a cabinet maker. And there was this lesson he taught Steve, that it's just as important to have the interior of the cabinet as beautiful as the exterior. And that mainly being that you need to take your time and effort into making sure the things that people don't see are just as well built as the things that people see. Where it's like most stuff, you put a shiny shell over a piece of shit, and then like a lot of products, especially technology products. It's just like you'll see this cool looking thing, but it functionality wise, it sucks. It's horrible. And Steve Jobs, with what he was making, was very passionate about making sure everything looked, not only functioned and was like structurally good, but were the interior of things were like visually pleasing. So if you were to ever open up a Mac, you would see that the circuit boards and motherboards are laid out in a specific way that looks beautiful. So there is that, and that kind of shines through. That kind of character element of Steve Jobs shines through. It doesn't really dip into necessarily as much of the other quirks that he had. How like he stunk and had like a crazy like vegetarian diet, and he was very much like a hippie, a very like just a dirty hippie kind of a guy that got into doing technology. And I think a lot of his kind of forward thinking, where he credits his acid trips and his hallucinogens, where he's able to kind of see the direction things are headed, and kind of get to them. Not always the first. I mean, he wasn't the first guy to have apps on a phone or have a touchscreen phone or anything, but he was the first one to do it right. He was the first one to do something that's easy to use, which is a huge thing that Apple does better than anybody. The ease of use, where a child can pick up the device and just inherently know how to use it. But kind of marrying that with the power of these technological devices and what they can do. So I really like the movie. I really enjoyed it. I'm glad I watched it. I was emotional at the end. I mean, it got me, but I'm glad. I probably wouldn't have liked it as much if I had watched it before, just because so much of the discussion around this movie when it came out was just nitpicky stuff about how inaccurate certain things were. Which, if you want to know Steve Jobs, don't watch the movie. Read the book, and even the book, I'm sure, has some biases to it as well. But yes, 2015, Steve Jobs. Go check it out on Netflix. It's a great movie. And Danny Boyle, check out all of his movies because they're all great as well. New episodes of The Ray Taylor Show come out every single day. Subscribe on IGTV, YouTube, and everywhere else podcasts are found. Go buy my artwork over at inspireddisorder.com and save 25% when you use coupon code RTS. Follow me on social media at Ray Taylor. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Peace out!